Number 10. The murder of Christina YUNA Lee. On Sunday morning in February 2022, Christina YUNA Lee was brutally stabbed to death in her apartment. She bled out in the bathtub of her own home after a homeless man broke into a New York City apartment and attacked her with a knife. The 35-year-old woman never saw it coming. Chilling surveillance footage obtained by the Post shows the killer following Lee from the moment she returned home. As she made her way up 6 flights of stairs to her apartment, he stalked close behind and forced his way into the apartment just before she could close the door. The suspect is 25-year-old Asamad Nash, a homeless man who had been a career criminal from a very early age. According to court records, he already had a history of crime going back to 2012, including multiple robberies and violence. He punched an elderly man in the face and stole his Metro card and was actually on supervised release when he broke into Lee's home at 4 o'clock in the morning. According to a criminal complaint and police sources, 5 days before he murdered Lee, he had been caught damaging Metro card machines in Manhattan subway stations, then ran away from officers trying to arrest him. And even after being hit with 27 counts of criminal mischief, he was allowed free to follow a woman to her home and kill her. Number 9. Christmas on Fire. During the Christmas season of 2021, a homeless man was busted in New York City setting the Fox News Christmas tree on fire. The vagrant did the unthinkable outside the extremely busy Rockefeller Center in Manhattan in front of dozens of tourists and patrolling officers. The suspect is 49-year-old Craig Tamahana. Somehow he slipped past security and pushed his way inside of the artificial tree. He then used its internal metal frame to scale up to the top of the holiday structure and lit some cardboard on fire while he was still inside. As he was trying to leave the scene, Craig was tackled to the ground by a security officer who watched him sneak out of the now smoking tree. Unfortunately, it was too late to stop the flames. The tree was beyond any kind of saving. Apparently, Craig had been planning the attack on the Christmas tree for a while. According to his father, Richard, he believes his son had probably burned the Christmas tree because he was hungry for attention. Richard called Craig a destructive nutcase and claimed Craig had a drug problem. He also admitted he's never been able to control him. Craig, who was unofficially called the Grinch of New York City, ended up causing about $500,000 in damage. Number 8. Homeless Hunter. Recently, in March of 2022, police offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of a vicious man who started hunting homeless people in the streets of Manhattan. On March 12th at about 5 o'clock in the morning, the unidentified man, dressed all in black, approached a homeless man sleeping on the side of the street in Soho and shot him in the arm. Thankfully, the victim was taken to the hospital where he made a full recovery. Less than an hour after that, the man found another victim snoozing peacefully in a sleeping bag near Lafayette Street. This time, though, the man with the gun shot the vagrant twice, once in the head and then in the neck, killing him almost instantly. He then took off and no one has any idea who he might be. The second incident was actually caught on camera, but unfortunately there's nothing to identify the man except a tiny slit in his ski mask where you can see a part of his white forehead and nose. And because his motive is unclear, without any physical evidence, police don't really have any way to figure out his identity. Number 7. New York City Squirrel Man. A homeless man in New York City recently decided he was going to live in a tree in Riverbank State Park. He has since been dubbed the Squirrel Man because he quite literally resided in a tree. But in March of 2022, the Squirrel Man was evicted from that tree, and he did not handle it well. He beat a photographer with a garbage bag full of clothes and even attacked a reporter with a New York Post using a branch. And he did this all right in front of officers from the NYPD. Police and city park officials arrived to kick the vagrant out of his treehouse. They actually brought chainsaws with the intention of cutting the whole tree down if the Squirrel Man refused to cooperate. The tree dweller was identified as 44-year-old Ruel Altanaga. He was so upset to be evicted from his treehouse that he shimmied down the trunk, attacked the reporter with a branch, and then took off. But obviously he didn't get far. The police arrested him, and he was charged with assault and criminal mischief. Do you think the police should let homeless people live in trees? Tell us in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 6. Wrong place to bathe. In the summer of 2017, an alligator attacked a homeless man as he was bathing in a Florida pond. The gator made off with the vagrant's left index finger, 2 toes, and a testicle. The homeless man was identified as 68-year-old Frederick German. After being bit several times, Frederick managed to escape the gator's jaws and stumble his way to a nearby surgery center when a worker called police. Frederick told WZVN that he had been taking his usual Monday morning bath at a retention pond in Port Charlotte, about 100 miles or just over 160 kilometers south of Tampa, when the attack unfolded. He said, quote, "You're having a nice day one minute and the next minute you're a bloody mess." He said at first he didn't really feel any pain, and it wasn't until later on that he realized the extent of his injuries. Frederick, who has been homeless for over 20 years, said he's been bathing in local ponds for the last decade, and he doesn't plan to stop now. Florida Fish and Wildlife officials said the alligator was later removed from the pond and was euthanized. Number 5. Killer Ninja. In November 2017, a homeless man wielding a samurai sword with some kind of ninja star tattooed on the center of his forehead stabbed a fellow homeless man to death. The man with the samurai sword is 51-year-old George Christopher Livingston, and he's been charged with second-degree murder in the state of California. The police received a 911 call on a Saturday afternoon that someone was discovered lying by the railroad tracks covered in blood. The body was about 10 miles or just about 16 kilometers from West Palm Beach. Officers found the homeless victim badly sliced and a 3-foot or 1 meter long samurai sword lying on the ground nearby. One of the witnesses was George Livingston, who after being questioned admitted he was the one that did it. According to what George said, he and his victim, David Beckett, had an argument. The argument led to an altercation on the edge of a homeless encampment beside the railroad tracks where George stabbed David with a samurai sword. No one knows where he got the weapon or why he resorted to slashing his friend, but David did not recover, and George is now looking at life in prison. George was already a felon with a lengthy list of past arrests, including at least one count of aggravated stalking. He wasn't allowed to be carrying a weapon at the time of the murder, not even a sword. Number 4. Horse Killer in Sacramento. At the beginning of 2022 in Sacramento County, a homeless man viciously bashed a horse in the face with a hammer and killed 15 chickens in their coop. According to the owner of the house, she normally wakes up super early in the morning to feed her animals, but that morning her intuition told her to stay inside. She didn't go out to the stalls until 9 o'clock in the morning, and that was when she saw a homeless man standing in front of her horse's stall with a hammer. She hollered at him to go away, and he just kind of wandered off like he had no idea where he was. When she could no longer see him, she rushed to check on her animals, and that's when she discovered the carnage. The vagrant had beat the poor horse with his hammer. Causing massive, ugly bruising all over the animal's body, and the horse's head had a nasty wound as well. Fortunately, a veterinarian was called in and the horse was properly taken care of, but not without feeling extreme pain and misery. The chicken coop was a bloody scene. The homeless man had gone nuts and literally ripped the chickens apart like some kind of rabid chupacabra. And to make things worse, the cops were already aware of this man and let him walk around even though they knew he could be dangerous. When they showed up, all they said was that he, quote, wasn't supposed to be in that particular area. Number 3. Teen chooses life of crime. A freshman dance student was discovered dead in a creek not far from the University of Texas campus. The victim was 18-year-old Haruka Weiser, and she was brutally killed by Mikael Kreiner, a homeless teenager only 17 years old. According to Austin police, Mikael was discovered with a duffel bag that belonged to Haruka. Mikael and Haruka met on April 3, 2016. Haruka was staring down at her phone as she walked in the direction of the Alumni Center. Surveillance footage shows Mikael creepily watching Haruka, then calmly getting off his bike and following closely behind the woman. He's seen pulling something out of his pocket and following Haruka across a bridge outside the view of security cameras. The cameras wouldn't see him again until almost 2 hours later, now with a slight limp and a small duffel bag on his shoulder. Mikael Kreiner's story is sad, but definitely not an excuse for murder. His grandmother kicked him out of her home 300 miles or just shy of 500 kilometers away and told him a boy his age needed to make it on his own in the world. So he went to Austin. He didn't have any money and decided not to get a job and became homeless. He turned to crime and decided Haruka was an easy target. He assaulted her, murdered her, and stole what little she had in her possession at the time. In 2018, Mikael Kreiner was given life in prison, and he won't be eligible for parole for 40 years. Number 2. Serial Squatter. 3 women who were targeted by a homeless serial squatter recently spoke up about their horrifying experiences. This serial squatter's name was Jameson Bachman, and he had been terrorizing people for years before murdering his own brother in a psychotic fit of rage. Jameson was from Pennsylvania, and he came up with the scheme of, quote, renting a room in a person's house and then turning their lives into into a living nightmare. He would use a fake name in Craigslist ads, tell people he was a lawyer, and then never paid any rent. He came off as clean, educated, and a decent person. But after a few short days of living together, he would begin to do all kinds of weird things, like clog their toilet with cat litter, steal their light bulbs, and start arguments about nothing for no reason. One of his first victims was Arlene Hairbaden, whom he moved in with in 2006. After refusing to pay rent, he strangled Arlene. Then he went to police to file a report claiming that she tried to stab him. This resulted in Arlene being kicked out of her own house by the cops. Then, while she was locked out, Jameson killed her 2 pet cats. He went on to ruin a lot more people's lives. One of the last victims was Alex Miller, whom he lived with in 2017. He beat her so badly that he was arrested and sent to jail. When his brother Harry bailed him out and allowed Jameson to stay at his home, Jameson killed him. He tried to get away in his dead brother's car, but was surrounded by a SWAT team. Jameson died in prison on December 8, 2017, at the age of 60. Number 1. Run over. In late April of 2022, a couple believed to be homeless together were killed on some New York City subway tracks. They were discovered at around 11 o'clock in the morning near the 145th Street 1 stop in Hamilton Heights. According to the NYPD, the woman's body was found inside the subway tunnel, while her male companion had been horrendously dragged by the force of the train all the way to the nearby stop. The victims didn't have any identification with them, so authorities haven't been able to figure out who they are. It is believed that they were trying to make a living down in the subway tunnels, probably using the tunnels as a shelter when they were accidentally run over by the train. According to the chief of the MTA, Pat Warren, around 350 people are living inside 29 separate encampments that are all tucked away inside New York City's subway system. That's 29 tiny underground villages filled with homeless people. There are also about 89 people actually living inside the stations themselves. Thanks for watching. Would you rather wake up to find a homeless man sleeping on your couch or one taking a bath in your pool? Tell us in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.